The first call came in at 6:47 a.m. A man had walked out of the Mercer woods, barefoot, dazed, and whispering nonsense. He was bleeding from his palms, eyes wide like he'd seen something no one should ever see. Deputy Claire Whitaker arrived minutes later, expecting a drunk or a lost hiker. But when the man looked up, something stopped her cold. "I'm Jacob Mercer," he said, voice trembling. "Can I go home now?" Claire's stomach dropped. That name hadn't been spoken in years. Not since the flyers, the nightly searches, the candlelight vigils. Jacob Mercer had vanished from those woods 30 years ago. He was only 10. This man standing before her looked 40. But the fear in his eyes, that was the unmistakable fear of a lost child. What comes next will change everything. To uncover the truth hidden in the shadows, stay with us. Subscribe to Missing Shadows, where every story whispers a secret. They put him in a quiet hospital room on the second floor of St. Mary's Medical Center, just past the children's wing. A cruel irony no one dared mention aloud. The man, the boy, who called himself Jacob Mercer, sat by the window every morning, watching the trees sway. He barely spoke unless spoken to. When he did, it was in short, childlike sentences. Questions about his mother, about school, about his bike. He had the body of a grown man, broad shoulders, stubble on his cheeks, a chest marked with the signs of time and trauma. But behind his eyes lived a 10-year-old still wondering why the world had gotten so loud, so fast. Doctors called it trauma-induced regression. The media called it a miracle, a mystery, maybe a hoax. But Jacob, he didn't call it anything. He just wanted to go home. There were things he didn't remember. Birthdays, seasons, growing up. But sometimes in the quiet, his hands would tremble like they were remembering what his mind couldn't. He flinched at sudden light. He hated silence. At night, he whispered things in his sleep. "Don't follow the light. Don't listen to the voice." A social worker brought him sketch pads. He filled them with drawings of trees. Always trees. Sometimes in the background, a pair of eyes. No one could reach him. Not fully. And when his parents were called in for the DNA match, the reunion was not what anyone expected. He didn't remember them. He didn't recognize his own mother. Jacob Mercer had come back from the woods, but someone had come back with him. July 17, 1995. It was supposed to be an ordinary Monday. Jacob had just turned 10 a week earlier. He still wore the red wristband from his birthday party, the kind kids got at bowling alleys and roller rinks. His parents, Rachel and Tom Mercer, had taken the day off work. It was hot, the kind of sticky Vermont heat that clings to your skin and slows down time. Jacob had asked if he could go exploring behind their house, just to the edge of the woods. He loved the trees, loved pretending they were castles or ships. Rachel had called out, "Be back in time for lunch, bug catcher," and smiled as she watched him run off with a peanut butter sandwich in one hand and his bug jar in the other. That was the last time she saw him. The search began 3 hours later. At first, no one panicked. Kids wander. They get distracted. But by sundown, the entire neighborhood was combing the woods with flashlights, yelling his name. The sheriff's office brought in dogs. Helicopters buzzed overhead for 3 days. Nothing. Not even a footprint. The woods became a crime scene. A week passed, then a month. Then fall came, and with it, silence. Rachel Mercer never forgave herself. She stopped working, stopped talking to most people. She would leave Jacob's room untouched for years. Books still stacked by his bed, his drawings taped to the wall. Tom tried to be strong, tried to move forward, but the silence between them became unbearable. They divorced in 2002. The town slowly let the case fade. People whispered, of course. Some said he ran away. Others, something darker. The Mercer name became a kind of sad cautionary tale. And Jacob? Wherever he had gone, whenever it happened, something in him had frozen in that moment. His fingers still remembered holding the bug jar, his voice still lilted with the inflections of a child. But at night, in the sterile hospital bed, Jacob would curl into himself and mutter, "The light came down, but it wasn't the sun." Whatever happened in those woods, it broke something in him, something that had never healed us and maybe never would. It started with a drawing. 3 weeks after Jacob reappeared, a nurse named Danny found him sitting cross-legged on the hospital floor, sketchpad in his lap, eyes blank. He was scribbling furiously in black crayon, his fingers dark and smudged. His meals had gone untouched all day. "Jacob?" she asked gently. No response. When she finally crouched down, he turned the page toward her, his hand trembling. The image was crude but unmistakable, a cluster of towering pine trees, and at the center, a large figure, tall, thin, featureless. Just black, with long fingers and no face. But it wasn't just the drawing that unsettled Danny. It was what Jacob whispered next. He said I wasn't supposed to leave. That night, security footage showed something else strange. Around 3:12 a.m., Jacob left his room barefoot and wandered down the hallway to the east wing, a section closed for renovation. He stood staring at a sealed exit for 27 minutes. Then he turned and returned to bed as if nothing had happened. The next morning, when asked about it, Jacob said, "He was calling me." From the trees, I almost remembered the path. Word of this behavior reached Dr. Reed Halpern, a cognitive psychologist who had been quietly observing Jacob's progress. Reed had his own reasons for being drawn to the case. 20 years ago, his younger brother went missing while camping near those same woods. Never found. Until Jacob resurfaced, Reed thought the forest had taken his brother. Now he wondered if the forest had held him, like Jacob. During a therapy session, Reed asked Jacob to describe what he meant by the light. Jacob stared off for a long time before answering, "It talks." Not in words, but you know how you feel something before it happens? Like when you're about to fall or when you know someone's watching you? Reed nodded slowly. It felt like that, but louder. That same week, Reed brought in a tool used in trauma therapy, a sensory trigger board filled with textures, sounds, smells. Jacob showed little reaction to most of it, until they got to the audio clips. One of the clips, a natural forest soundscape recorded years earlier from the Mercer woods, made Jacob seize. His eyes went wide. His mouth moved before his voice caught up. "Stop humming. Please, stop the humming." The clip didn't contain humming, not to anyone else. That night, Jacob had his first memory fragment, if you could call it that. He awoke screaming, clutching his chest, mumbling something about a spiral of trees and a door that hums like bees. He begged Reed not to let him sleep again. But what truly shifted everything wasn't from Jacob. It was from someone else. A woman named Evelyn Graves came forward. She was a retired park ranger who had worked in the area during the late 90s. After seeing Jacob's story on the news, she couldn't stay quiet. She told investigators about a sealed cave deep in the woods, one that had been quietly fenced off by state officials after strange sinkholes were reported in 1996. Evelyn admitted she'd heard strange things there too. Sounds that didn't belong. Whispers, vibrations, an unnatural cold. And one day, in 1997, she swore she saw a boy in a red shirt standing just beyond the fence, staring blankly at nothing. She blinked and he was gone. The cave had been forgotten for years, but now with Jacob back, it was calling again. Jacob knew the dreams weren't just dreams. Every night since his return, he saw the same vision, a spiraling tunnel of trees, a door in the earth that pulsed like a heartbeat, and whispers, always whispers, They made no sense, yet they clung to him like static. He needed answers, not from the doctors, not from news crews, or reporters asking how it felt to come back from the dead. He needed someone who remembered 1995 like he did, someone who was still there. That's when he asked for Lucas Bell. Lucas had been Jacob's best friend growing up, the last person to see him before he vanished. Now in his 40s, Lucas worked as a mechanic and kept to himself. When Reed Halpern contacted him, Lucas hesitated. "I was just a kid," he said, voice tight. "I barely remember anything." But when he saw Jacob, the same face, same voice he remembered from childhood, Lucas turned pale. "You haven't aged." Jacob nodded. "I remember walking into the woods that day. You dared me to go further." Lucas looked down. "I didn't think you'd do it. I was just being stupid." But there was something he wasn't saying. Reed noticed. Later that night, Lucas confessed to Reed over a drink. "I saw something that day, a flash of light. I heard him scream, but I ran. I told the cops I didn't see anything." His voice cracked. "I was afraid no one would believe me." Reed kept the secret, but the weight of it made him suspicious. What else had been hidden back then? Meanwhile, Jacob's mother, Rachel, finally agreed to visit him. Their first face-to-face meeting since his return. She walked in slow, trembling, carrying an old shoebox filled with Jacob's childhood things. Drawings, toy soldiers, a small flashlight with a cracked lens. "This was in your pocket the day you disappeared," she said, voice hollow. "They found it by the trail." Jacob held it like a sacred artifact. The moment he clicked it on, his head jerked back, and he gasped. "I remember red light, but the sky was dark, and something behind me, breathing." The memories were returning, but fragmented, distorted like a broken mirror. In the hospital, Reed began to log every memory Jacob recalled. Shapes in the forest, metallic scents, echoes of voices speaking backwards. He wasn't just unraveling trauma, he was peeling back layers of something unnatural. But with each memory, Jacob changed. He became restless, anxious, eyes flicking toward corners where no one stood. One night, hospital staff reported Jacob whispering to someone in his room, though no one was there. The next morning, Jacob asked Reed, "Why do you think I came back? What if I wasn't supposed to?" The question lingered. Then came an anonymous envelope, no return address. Inside was a photo, old and grainy, of the Mercer Woods taken in 1997. At the very center of the frame, a shadowed figure, small, childlike, wearing a red t-shirt. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "You left something behind." The search for the truth had begun, but every step forward dragged Jacob deeper into a past that no longer obeyed the rules of time or memory. The envelope had shaken Jacob, but he wasn't the only one it rattled. Dr. Reed Halpern stared at the photo for hours that night. It wasn't just the image that disturbed him. It was the handwriting on the back. He recognized it, faintly, from years ago. He dug through an old storage bin in his basement, rusted and dusty, untouched since his younger brother Noah went missing in 2003 during a Boy Scout trip near the same forest. Inside was a notebook from a child psychologist who had consulted on Noah's case, filled with scribbled notes, sketches, and symbols Noah had drawn. One page stopped Reed cold. The same spiral symbol Jacob had drawn, the same phrase, "Only those who forget can pass." And at the bottom, a messy, slanted note in a child's scrawl. "Jacob is still in there." Reed dropped the notebook. His blood went cold. The next morning, Reed returned to the hospital and confronted Jacob. "Do you know who Noah Halpern is?" Jacob blinked, confused. "No." Reed showed him the drawing from Noah's case file. Jacob's hand flew to his mouth. I've seen this in my dreams. Jacob, Reed said carefully, what if the person who came back wasn't actually you? Jacob stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you never left. Maybe part of you is still in there. And what came back, he paused, is just a shell that walked out. Jacob didn't speak. His hands trembled. I don't remember leaving, he whispered. I remember wanting to. I remember begging. And then silence. That night Lucas came clean. He showed up at Reed's office, pale, sweating. I lied, he said, back then and now. I didn't just see Jacob go in. I saw what pulled him. Reed stiffened. What do you mean? Lucas swallowed hard. There was something in the trees. It wasn't human. Tall, thin, no face. It didn't walk. It glided. Jacob ran when he saw it, but I froze. Then there was this flash, like lightning, and he was just gone. He looked at Reed, tears in his eyes. That thing saw me too, but it let me go. Why? I think because I didn't belong to it, but Jacob did. The pieces began to shift, painfully. Jacob wasn't the only one who had gone missing. The forest had taken others over the years. Reed's brother, Evelyn's nephew, even a hiker in 1982. All reported lost in different parts of the same woods. No remains, no evidence. Only a trail of symbols and silence. Reed brought this theory to Claire Whitaker, who reluctantly shared something from the sheriff's cold case files. A photograph of a door-like structure made of trees found by hunters in 1996, just months after Jacob vanished. The structure had since collapsed, but the surrounding bark was carved with spiral symbols. Jacob's symbols. The twist no longer felt like fiction. It felt inevitable. That night, Jacob finally broke. I don't think I ever came back, he sobbed to Reed. I think I'm still there. This version of me, I don't know if I'm real. Reed, shaken but steady, gripped his shoulder. You are real. You feel. You remember. Whatever came back, it's still you. Even if you're missing pieces. But what if it wants me back? Reed paused. Then we find the rest of you before it does. What they didn't know was this. The door had reopened. And this time, it wasn't waiting for someone to enter. It was coming through. It wasn't supposed to rain, but by the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sky had cracked open. A cold, endless drizzle soaking through their clothes. Jacob stood at the tree line, fists clenched, staring into the same woods he had vanished into 30 years ago. This time, he was going back. Beside him stood Dr. Reed Halpern and Deputy Claire Whitaker. Lucas stayed behind, too shaken. Evelyn was already inside, marking the path with chalk and glow sticks. None of them spoke. At the clearing near the old cave site, the hum began, low and vibrating through their feet. Jacob flinched, his breath catching. It's open, he whispered. They followed the hum until they found it. A natural spiral of trees twisted unnaturally into a perfect circle. And in the center, where moss didn't grow, and the ground was unnaturally dry, stood a door. Not wood, not stone, just shadow, shaped like a door. Jacob stepped forward. The air around it pulsed, and then it spoke. Not in words, but in a sound that hit the chest before the ears. Reed and Claire staggered back. Jacob froze, his eyes wide. You never left, the voice said inside him. Only the shell returned. He fell to his knees, gripping his head. Memories exploded behind his eyes. Flashes of the forest that wasn't a forest, of figures tall and watching, of time looping, bending, pausing. He saw himself curled in darkness, a boy forever 10, screaming without sound. Jacob sobbed. I left him behind. I left me. Reed dropped beside him. Then take him back. You don't need permission. I'm not strong enough. You don't have to be strong. You just have to decide. Jacob stood slowly. The shadows thickened around the doorway, the humming growing shrill, like protest. He stepped forward, trembling, every cell screaming in fear. But his hand reached out, and then, just before his fingers touched the door, it vanished. In its place stood a boy, 10 years old, mud on his cheek, red wristband on his arm. Jacob stared at himself, or what had been left of him. The boy looked up and whispered, "I waited." Without thinking, Jacob fell to his knees and embraced the child. The hum faded, the trees relaxed, time cracked, and then, in one blinding pulse of light, they were gone. Reed blinked. Claire screamed his name, but Jacob was no longer there. Only the wristband remained, wet from the rain, lying in the moss. The forest was silent again. No more hums, no more whispers, no doors made of shadow or spirals of trees, just wind and bird song and the distant rustle of leaves. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the woods were simply woods. They searched for Jacob for 3 days. Helicopters, dogs, teams with floodlights and drones. But he was gone, just like in 1995. No body, no trace, only the red wristband left behind in the moss, now carefully sealed in an evidence bag. The story gripped the nation again. News anchors debated what had happened. Some called it a staged disappearance. Others said Jacob had relapsed, mentally broken by the trauma. But those closest to him, Reed, Claire, Evelyn, Lucas, knew the truth, even if they couldn't explain it. Jacob had gone back, not to run, but to rescue what he left behind. For Reed, the consequences ran deep. He revisited old notes, reopened Noah's file, and wrote a letter to his long-lost brother. A letter he'd never send, but needed to write. Jacob found the part of himself that was left behind. Maybe that's the best we can do with trauma. Not erase it, but return to the place it took us and say, "I'm ready to come home." Claire took a leave of absence. She still walked the forest trails sometimes, placing small stone markers at the roots of old trees. She said it helped her believe there was still something sacred in that forest, even if it couldn't be understood. Rachel Mercer, Jacob's mother, never stopped grieving, but she did stop blaming herself. She held the wristband every night before bed, whispering stories about Jacob's favorite cartoons, the way he used to laugh with his whole chest, and how brave he had been in the end. And somewhere, deep in the quietest part of the forest, a boy's laughter echoed once more. Only once. Software like wind in the trees. Some people go missing in ways no search party can find. Not into woods or caves or corners of the world, but into grief, into silence, into the parts of themselves they were too young to protect. Jacob Mercer taught them something none of the doctors, reporters, or scientists could explain. That sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting what hurt you. It comes from facing the place it happened and choosing to return, not for answers, but for wholeness. Because not every return looks like survival. Sometimes it looks like surrender, and sometimes that's what saves you. Craving twisted mysteries and haunting tales? Hit subscribe before the story fades into the shadows.